if you go into theology, then you will find out that there are some striking similarities between Islam and Judaism. Both of these faiths are monotheistic, they believe in one God, and they do not give any physical description to that God and frown at the prospect of idolatry. They have similar rituals like circumcision and similar fooding habits, or rather, you can say similar things which they abstain from in terms of diet, like pork. Now, in spite of these striking similarities, these two faiths, or rather the proponents of these two faiths, have had a very uneasy relationship over the past 6 or 7 decades. Part of this uneasy relationship is caused due to the illegal occupation of Israel in Palestine. But a very significant chunk of the tensions caused between Muslims and Jews is due to the kind of misconceptions which are propagated about the Jews by the Islamists. Let us begin with something extremely widespread and whimsical. The idea that Jews control the economy of the world and they have so much of money and wealth with them that it is impossible to beat them. For example, people talk of Pepsi and say Pepsi basically stands for pay every penny to save Israel. P for pay, E for every, P for penny, S for save, I for Israel. And therefore, whenever you're purchasing Pepsi, you are donating that money to the Zionists, who in turn would use that money to arm the Israeli people, the Israeli administration, the Israeli army, and in turn they will be carrying out human rights abuses in the Palestinian region. Now this is something which is disgraceful. Pepsi has never said on record that it stands for pay every penny to save Israel. So how can you say that they are doing this when they are not doing this? The Islamists believe in a kind of economics which is the very antithesis of capitalism. And so they propagate such myths in order to ensure that their sympathizers boycott such products in the market. Another myth about the Jews which is propagated by the Islamists is that no Jews died during 9/11. Now this is something which is again unwarranted and unverifiable. There are no statistics, no official statistics to say that no Jews died during 9/11. And still the internet, if you go to the internet, Islamist sites are full of conspiracy theories stating that the Zionists were the ones who carried out 9/11 when Osama bin Laden on record said that he was the one who carried out 9/11. Still, they will say that the Zionists along with the CIA carried out 9/11 and all the Jews were holidaying on that day when the Twin Towers collapsed and hence no Jews died. It's something which is so very bizarre, but again widely propagated by the Islamists and believed by a huge section of Muslims, educated Muslims, sharing such things on their Facebook wall. Then another idea which is propagated by the Islamists is in regards to the issue of Palestine. Now you are celebrating, or rather commemorating every year, the Nakba Day, which is Palestinian exodus from from their own land when the Jews come into Israel. Now it is true that what was done to Palestinians and what is being done to Palestinians is shameful, regrettable, and it's inhumane. But why look at only one side of history? Yes, some 700,000 to 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes or were made to flee their homes during the initial days of the war when the Jews came and captured Israel. But in return, Some 800,000 to 1 million Jews were expelled from their homes in the Arab land, which you can call the counter Nakba, the counter Exodus. But nobody talks about it. You are talking of annihilation of the state of Israel. You are talking of an independent state of Palestine. You are talking about bringing the Arabs back into Israel, bringing them back into Israel and Palestine. But nobody is willing to concede over here that the Jews were peacefully living in the Arab world and you threw them out, and hence they all had to come back to Israel and get back here. Obviously, the idea that there should be one unified secular state is an idealistic idea, and it's far more rational to think of a separate Palestinian state. But we have to realize that Palestinians did suffer, but so did the Jews. Do not say that the Jews never suffered, only the Palestinians suffered. And lastly, and most importantly, the most foolish of the myths propagated by Islamists in regard to the Jews is that the Jews are the eternal enemies of Islam. What they do is that they pick up certain verses from the Quran, they misquote those verses. Those verses were about specific tribes in Medina who had broken, provisions of the treaty which the Muslims had with them. It was called the Constitution of Medina. They had violated the Constitution of Medina and they had backstabbed the Muslims. And so in the Quran, they are condemned and they are cursed. Now what these fanatic Muslim preachers and Islamists do is that they pick up these verses, misquote these verses, and they try and tell the public that the Jews are your eternal enemies. Do not sit with them, do not be friends with them, do not eat with them, do not do anything with them. What sort of a logic is that? The Quran itself says that the believers, the Jews, the Christians, and all those who believe in God, the last day, and do righteous deed shall be rewarded and they shall have nothing to fear. So how can you say that the Jews are the eternal enemies of Islam? There are so many similarities, as I mentioned earlier. You both believe in one God. You believe in a book. You believe in prophethood. You condemn idolatry. You have similar rituals. How can you say that the Jews and the Muslims cannot go together? They are nephews. They will go together. And anybody who says that the Jews and the Muslims cannot live together, they are eternal enemies, he needs to be told that, brother, you need to keep your mouth shut and stop spewing venom.